Hello, and welcome to the Northeast Ohio Media Group Candidate Debates. Thanks for joining us. I'm Mary Kilpatrick. Today we're hosting a debate for Ward 4 of Strongsville City Council. The candidates will introduce themselves in a moment, but first, the rules. We will start with 1 minute for each candidate to introduce themselves and say why they want to run. Then we'll ask questions, giving each candidate 90 seconds to answer and a minute for any follow-up. At the end, we will allow for 10 minutes for the candidates to ask each other questions, with 60 seconds to respond. Let's get started. Mr. Short.
Thank you, Mary. And good afternoon. First, I want to thank the Northeast Ohio Media Group for this opportunity to speak today and to share a little about myself and my plans for Ward 4 Strongsville. My name is Gordon Short, and I welcome the opportunity to represent my friends and neighbors in my community, which I've been proud to call home for the last 15 years. I'm running for council because, like my neighbors, I've experienced flooding, higher than necessary taxes, and like my neighbors, a lack of current response by our current representation in Ward 4. I care about our neighbors, our children, and the future of Strongsville. Not only do I reside in Ward 4, but I'm also a business person in Ward 4, working for a CPA firm as a senior manager and a tax director. My wife and I had an opportunity to move to Columbus. We chose to stay in Strongsville because we believe that is the best place to raise our family. And now I want to use my skills as a CPA and an attorney to ensure our children will be proud to call Strongsville home. So if elected, I pledge to be a more responsive councilman, returning phone calls within 24 hours to address your concerns immediately. Further my experience, education, and training as a CPA.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, that was a quick minute.
A minute goes fast.
Councilman Maloney.
Thank you, Mary. So since a very young age, I've always wanted to give back to the community. I've always been involved with different civic and volunteer efforts, Cub Scouts and church, and then you fast forward to adulthood, and my wife and I share a passion for getting involved and making a difference. So I've been in elected office for almost 15 years now. I've been elected or re-elected 4 times. I've been appointed to fill 2 vacant seats, one on school board, one on city council. And then if you look at most recently this 4-year term on city council, I believe I've really accomplished largely what residents expected me to do. And coupled with that, being involved with Strongsville United Methodist Church, the Rotary, Cub Scout Pack 226, our Echo Lake Homeowner Association, there's a whole lot of facets to things that I do to give back to Strongsville, and believe that I'll be able to contribute that much more as I get into being re-elected to a 2nd term. Thank you.
All right, well, let's get into the questions. My first question, Mr. Short. Strongsville's business sector continues to grow, with large companies such as Vitamix setting down roots in the city. How do you believe the city can best attract private sector business?
Well, I want to say first that the administration under leadership of Mayor Persiak has done a fantastic job of attracting companies to Strongsville, and Brent Painter, who's our Director of Economic Development, continues to do a wonderful job. I think we can continue to promote Strongsville outside of Northeast Ohio and across the country by using tax incentives and tax abatements, and also piggybacking upon state programs that are available out there, and to promote those across to businesses outside of Ohio. The Ohio Small Business Investor Business Deduction is a huge tax savings for small business owners to attract more businesses to Strongsville, both smaller, and then there's also incentives for larger companies. So we have a lot of great resources in Strongsville. We're right along 71. We're close to the Cleveland airport. It's a good location, as we say, with the crossroads of the nation. So I believe we continue to develop or attract businesses, and also further with that, also make it a better place for those employees who work at those companies to live and reside in Strongsville. So if we can again foster a lower tax community, promote our services, we can not only attract the businesses but also the residents to live in Strongsville and stay in Strongsville. So I think this administration has done a very good job. We can continue to build upon that and make available these resources to businesses outside Northeast Ohio.
Any response, Councilman?
Well, I think much of what my challenger has said, we're already doing, obviously. We have an incredible reputation as a business incubator here in Northeast Ohio. We've won awards from Team NEO in 2014. We do an annual survey of businesses that do business in Strongsville, and in 2014, 100% of them said that they would absolutely recommend that other businesses look to Strongsville they consider doing business there. So we've got those incentives in place. We've got the networking out there, not just the mayor and his administration and Brent Painter, but members of council are also regularly involved with that behind the scenes. I'm routinely talking to Brent about different businesses we read about in the news or that we hear about through our networking that are maybe looking for a relocation or an expansion, and we always are talking about, okay, how do we leverage that and get that ultimately turned into reality, as we've seen additions onto many of our businesses in our commercial parks, and we've seen, again, with Vitamix, 600 new jobs came into Strongsville when they ran out of space in a neighboring community and needed to expand. So I think we're hitting on all cylinders with that.
Okay. Well, I want to give you the opportunity to answer the same question. So how do you believe Strongsville can continue and best attract private sector expansion?
Well, I know that what we've been doing, even beyond a local presence, is Brent Painter, I think, has done a great job of even reaching out internationally. We've got a number of businesses from abroad that have U.S. operations, and we found that we've been successful not only in attracting business from the Northeast Ohio region and some of our neighboring states, but we've even got from over in Europe and other parts of the world now coming in and setting up shop with their American operations in Strongsville. So we've seen some success there, and I think, again, there's nothing better than word of mouth, and it's great to have them as ambassadors going back to their respective countries to say, hey, if you're going to be doing business in the United States, here's a community that has strived very hard to make it very easy to do business. You come to our planning commission meetings, we've had a lot of people tell us, and I'm the council's representative on that planning commission, very easy process. It's not a lot of hoops to jump through. We get in and we get out quickly, and they really appreciate the efficiency that we've built into all of our processes that a business would have to go through to get permits and to get set up and to do business.
In your response, Mr. Short?
Well, I'd just also say we also have to ensure we're attracting the right type of companies and the right types of businesses. Vitamix is a great example of that, and we need more of that. While retail was very strong in Strongsville, and we appreciate that, we also want higher paying jobs and more stronger paying jobs, because those, again, are good for the community. That's better tax revenues to the community. And so I think as we look to develop, it's got to be smart. It has to be very thought out development, carefully planned, and also coordinated with the residents. As land in Strongsville is becoming more and more scarce, as we've been developed both residentially and commercially, we need to ensure that we are working with our residents to ensure that when we are putting in new businesses and in these small parcels of vacant land that we still have left outside the industrial parks, that we work with those residents in those neighborhoods to ensure that we are working together to ensure that it's a good compromise, good fit for that area of Strongsville, Ward 4 or elsewhere, and also that it makes sense for the businesses coming into town. And I also would team with council to do that, and especially some of the plans to make more uniform decorations and business signage in Strongsville, so a more complete and uniform city.
Okay. All right. My next question, Mr. Maloney. Flooding continues to be a major issue in Strongsville. What should be done?
Well, we're already doing a tremendous amount. My challenger's been going around town talking about we're not doing enough and we're not being responsive, and that's just absolutely not true. I've done more in Ward 4 in my 4-year term than we've ever had done in the history of a 4-year term on council for Ward 4 in Strongsville. I've gotten more projects done, and there's been more millions of dollars invested in that ward, doing a whole series of projects in communities throughout Ward 4 over that entire 4-year period, to where people are telling me, thank you, we finally have somebody that's come in here and gotten something done to correct flooding that's happened repeatedly in some neighborhoods 6, 8, 12 times over a 15 or 20-year period. So there are many examples of neighborhoods that I've gone into, and I've met with homeowners, and I've been there when it's pouring rain in the middle of a storm, watching what the water's doing, and take that information back to our engineering and our service departments, and I've worked with the mayor and the rest of council. It takes all 7 on council to work together to get funding for a given project in a given ward. It's not just that my challenger or anybody says, well, I'll go find it and I'll make it happen. Well, it's with the cooperation of council and the mayor and other levels of government to find that funding. So I think I've been very successful at that. The people that I've made the fixes that needed to be made are the beneficiaries of that, and they've told me loud and clear that we love what you're doing and we'll support you to get into another term and keep it going.
Any response, Mr. Short?
Sure, and we've had devastating flooding in Ward 4, and I've been in the basements and I've seen the despair. I've seen the anger, the frustration of people's basements being flooded. And what concerns me and frustrates me is that it's been reactionary. We've known about flooding. This has happened in the past. And while the city has been responsive and we're now fixing these problems, we need to be more proactive. We need to ensure that this it does not happen every time it rains, and that even if we have a major storm, we can handle that water. And so I would look, we need to have a comprehensive plan, a 5-year plan to do this, not just a fix every time that it rains. And so it's going to take budgeting, it's going to take planning, it's going to take time. But we need to let the residents know that we are working on this, we're being proactive and not just reactive after a storm and then throwing money at the problem. So the other thing too is we need to listen to our residents. I'll give you a great example. In Waterford Crossing, which is a huge development in our ward, there were concerns 3 to 4 years ago about a development going in behind there and flooding. Those concerns were not addressed, and they flooded for the first time ever in their history. So we need to fix and work on those problems and work with our residents to ensure it's, again, smart and proper growth.
Thank you. Any response, Mr. Maloney?
Absolutely. His statement about flooding happening that's related to recent storms and it was caused by the latest phase of development at Waterford are absolutely false. That's not true. We did development back there with engineering of the developers that were going to build those homes, and we built basins back there that have a capacity for a 100-year storm. The government only requires capacity for a 5-year storm. All new development now, the capacity well exceeds that. And in the last heavy rain in May, I went out to the streets that were affected by flooding in the past, directly adjacent to that land. And I said, well, what are you seeing in the way of water when your yards used to flood? And they said, we're not seeing any. So the basins are doing what we expected them to do. Again, we're finding the funding to get these projects done. We're not being reactionary. There is a 5-year plan in the city that lays out what all those projects are and what the costs are, and we work to that every year. So that's just information that he doesn't happen to have.
So, Mr. Short, same question. What should be done about flooding in Strongsville?
Right, well, as I mentioned, I think we need to have a comprehensive plan. We need to look at funding to improve our infrastructure, especially in some of the old areas of the ward where, again, it was built 20, 25 years ago when we were a 50,000 person city. Obviously, we're a much larger city now, larger capacity for water. We've cleared a lot of land. So again, there's not the ability for trees and grass to absorb that. It goes into streets, goes into concrete, and goes into our sewer line. So we need to ensure that we have larger detention basins, retention basins, and we need to ensure we have proper sewer pipes. And again, I'm not an engineer, but I will work with engineering, find the money in the budget. I'd like to do a top-to-bottom review of our finances and where we can find inefficiencies and better ways to spend government money. And I've been out talking, and I've talked to city employees that say we can save money, but we're not being heard. And I'd like to have an open relationship with our city employees so that we can find this money and put that back into the infrastructure of the ward. And just to go back to Waterford, I mean, yes, things have been done, but I've knocked on the door just the other day, and the guy said, my basement just flooded again. I just moved here, $300,000, $400,000 home, and I flooded again. So again, I'm not an engineer, but obviously development has hurt some areas of our ward, and we need to continually address and talk to our residents, listen to fix these problems. And again, being proactive, having a 5-year plan at least, to find the funding, state grants, federal grants, to ensure that we are showing our residents we are working towards it. It's not going to happen overnight, and I understand it's been very tough, but we have to be proactive on this.
Sure. My next question, many Strongsville residents are concerned with road improvements, and the city has a new tax on the ballot dedicated to fixing roads. Are you in favor of the increase, Mr. Short?
Very good question. Thank you for that. I am not, and I'll tell you why. Yes, we have lots of streets in Strongsville, and they need repaired. And I know you can't fix them all in 1 year. But, however, when I look at the city finances, when I look at income tax collections are at an all-time high in the city of Strongsville, when I look at that the city is running a surplus right now, why are we going back to our residents? And the first one to do is ask for a tax increase, especially when this would have been actually a tax decrease with the library levy coming off the ballot, coming off the tax roll. So, again, why are we looking at taxing when we haven't looked at the spending side of the ledger? Again, being a CPA, I understand revenues and cash flows and inflows, but I also understand spending. And I believe we should look at our spending side of the income statement first. Where can we find savings there that we can, again, address infrastructure, again, address roadways and fixing those roads, as opposed to just putting us back into the burden of our residents. I believe that we haven't looked at the spending side first. So I would have voted no on this tax increase. It's a noble cause. So yes, we're going to put it towards our roads. But again, I think with a surplus in the budget, with income tax revenues at an all-time high, we should not be taxing our residents the first thing we do. We should look at other ways to find money in the budget to fix those roadways.
Any response, Councilman?
Yes, so some of the statements made are indicative of just not having been exposed to how government finance works. We have a surplus every year because that's required. We need to have enough funds on hand that if we were to run into hard times, in our case, we put enough surplus on hand to fund the government for up to 3 months if we didn't have revenue. That's number one. Number two, we've actively looked at the expense side of the equation for years, and we've done a lot of things to save a lot of money. For example, we've leveraged technology for going on 6, 7 years now. We've reduced 48 positions in the city, and we've saved, that's around $2.5 million a year in salary and benefits. So it's not a case that we're not doing that. And he talks about, top to bottom review. Well, we do a zero-based approach every year. We look at everything from a clean slate and decide how we're going to fund different different departments in the city. So we're doing all those things and making a difference that way. We do need the money for the streets. The residents have told us we're not getting the streets done fast enough, and there's not enough revenue to do it at the pace they want to see it.
Thank you. So same question. What should be done, are you in favor of the tax increase for the roads?
I'm absolutely in favor of that. It's not going to cost a resident a significant amount of money on an annual basis. And I'm out there listening to my constituents, and they're telling me loud and clear the two things they're most concerned about are flooding and our water management infrastructure and our streets. And the streets are not being rehabilitated at the pace they'd like to see. We've invested an unprecedented amount of money in streets over the last 4 to 5 years. It's not enough because we're still trying to play catch up from decades past where we hadn't done anything with the streets. I have neighborhoods that were built 40 years ago that hadn't seen any street activity when I got on council. So I have to figure out how to be proactive, as he says, and deal with that. We've gotten 30 streets done out of 150 in Ward 4 in my first term. That is far more streets than have ever been done, again, in a 4-year term on city council in Strongsville. So I've absolutely made a difference. I've found the funding. We're making progress. But the residents are saying, again, it's not fast enough. We recently completed a study. We have 15 linear miles of street throughout Strongsville that are in fair to poor condition that need to be addressed. We don't have that kind of money to just go out and spend in a given year. And no, there's not a whole bunch of opportunities to save money that haven't been explored or encountered, contrary to what he's claiming some of the employees are telling him in his conversations with them. So we definitely need that money. If the residents agree, then they'll vote in favor of it. They get the opportunity to vote on it, and then we'll accelerate our pace of doing streets.
Thank you. Any response, Mr. Short?
Yes, just briefly, a couple of quick points. In terms of looking at top to bottom review, we did one in Treasurer Mandel's office. You'd be amazed at what your employees can come up with. Example, something as simple as we had a woman watering our plants that was costing us $3,000 a year, taxpayer money that we said we can do that ourselves, to implementing a treasury management system that saved over $100,000 a year to the taxpayers of Ohio. So you'd be amazed at what can come out of those top to bottom reviews. And the other thing is the state auditor will allow, and if a city asks for a performance audit, which will look at how can they improve to be more efficient in more ways. I don't believe one has been done for the city of Strongsville in a long time. So again, the city will do that at no cost to a city if they don't find any savings to you. So I believe there's still opportunities for us to find opportunities to save on the spending side of the ledger before we go ask our residents for an income tax increase, or I'm sorry, a real estate tax increase.
Sure. All right, Councilman Maloney, next question. Traffic at the intersection of State Road 82 and Interstate 71 continues to frustrate drivers. What should be done?
Great question. We have been working with the Ohio Department of Transportation for about 18 months now. They recognize that as one of the top, I think it's the top 20 most dangerous areas for traffic in the state of Ohio. We're well aware of that. We've actually secured $8 million of funding that will be coming from the Ohio Department of Transportation, ultimately to do projects in that area to ease congestion. The first project we're going to be doing in 2016, when you're heading eastbound on Royalton to get on the 71 North in the morning, we're adding a second lane to that entrance ramp, so that'll dramatically ease congestion heading north downtown to work in the morning. Another project that's in the planning stages right now is to add what's called a slip ramp when you're heading down 71 southbound to pass the Royalton Road interchange and come up on Shermer Road, which will allow a lot of traffic that lives in the southern parts of Strongsville and down in Brunswick, which creates a lot of our congestion, to go past the traffic associated with the mall and ease congestion there. So those are just two examples of a number of different things that we're looking at. Another one is we added a second turn lane on Royalton heading east into the plaza at South Park, where a lot of people were having trouble getting in there to the stores. And we also added a road back behind there to link what used to be Borders Books is now Great Escape let traffic come through there behind the scenes and get over to those stores as well. So we've done a number of things. Our work's not done, but we've definitely got a lot of action plans for that area.
Sure. Any response, Mr. Short?
No, not really. I mean, I've attended the council meetings, and the mayor has said about the project with ODOT to extend the second lane onto 7182, which is much needed. I mean, we've talked about the chicken that's always played there, and it's a high accident. It could be potentially a high accident area. So no, I think in terms of that being interchange, I think that's being addressed by the city. So I have nothing to add to that comment.
Sure. Well, I want to give you the chance to answer the same question. What do you think should be done in that intersection?
Well, again, I mean, not much more than what they're doing. I think they've addressed that. Congestion, especially around the holidays, is horrible there, and I'm not sure when that's slated to begin, but sooner is better than later in regard to that. So I really think, I have to say, I give Mayor Persiak a lot of credit. He is a forward thinker. You know, he came from the banking industry, and you know, he's a Strongsville guy, and you know, I think his administration has done a good job of looking at congestion areas like that. And that is, I mean, the growth there has been tremendous. Again, kudos back to economic development with Costco, Best Buy, the mall. The Great Escape has come in there. I think that the amount of traffic has just exploded there. And so what the city's doing, I think, is it needs to be done. And hopefully once that lane is put in, it will ease a lot of congestion up around Royalton and 71.
Any response, Councilman?
Yeah, you know, the only thing I would add is that just for anybody who's watching this, to help them realize that it's not always by choice that we end up with what we have. You know, the city did not want necessarily for that development to go there with the Best Buy and the Costco and everything, and we fought it in court for almost 10 years, and ultimately we lost. The same thing has happened in a few other cases. So when people are frustrated and say, well, why did you let this get built, or why do you keep building, and it's creating congestion and it's putting pressure on flooding or whatever, it's not, you know, property owners' rights ultimately prevail in case law. And however much people might sometimes be frustrated with that, we then have to figure out how to do the best job we can to manage what the effects of that are going to be in terms of traffic in this case, or our other infrastructure, and make sure we're in good shape to minimize frustration for residents.
Sure. Mr. Short, next question. How do you believe the city can attract young families and young professionals?
You know, great question, and that's also the lifeblood of a community. One is, and you know, as a city council, we don't have a lot of control of this, but also these great schools. And I think Strongsville has a very good school system. We have a great school board there, and I look at it as one Strongsville, the city and the school as well. You know, obviously, the school board can't control what city council does, and city council can't really control what school board does. We have to work together and team up for basically a one Strongsville approach, because great schools will attract good families, as well as, again, a lower tax burden to the citizens of Strongsville. Great businesses, not only from like a Vitamix where they can actually work, but also where they can shop, and they can also great restaurants. So continue to foster that development around smaller businesses, restaurants, and really, again, if we can look at, again, not imposing higher real estate taxes, looking at our spending, looking at ways we can you know, save them money and make Strongsville an attractive place to raise their family, I think is very key. So I think for the city is to do what, again, we can't affect school board, but really schools are a big attraction to a city. And I think our schools are great. We can continue to improve on them. From a city council, we can't really affect that, but to work with them, to team with them. What do they need from the city that we can assist them with? Again, I'm not privy to all of the day-to-day communications between them, and there's a liaison between the council and the school board, but to work with them to ensure we have the best schools to attract families to Strongsville.
Thank you. Any response, Councilman Maloney?
Sure. Absolutely, schools are a key part of it. But I do want to comment on, my challenger keeps talking about, well, the tax burden's too high, and I don't think that's true. Are we collecting more taxes than we ever did? Absolutely. The community's bigger than it ever was. You build more homes, you bring in more businesses, you're going to bring in more tax revenue. And that tax revenue, in turn, is needed for more infrastructure. We have over 200 miles of roads. We have 190 miles of sanitary sewer system. We have 190 miles of storm sewer system. We had to go from 1 fire station years ago to 4. We had to increase our police force as they built the mall and as more subdivisions got built. Safety from a city perspective, we believe, is one of the key things that, in combination with the schools, are what people are looking for. They want to feel safe in their community. They want to be able to go out at night for a walk. They want to feel that their kids are safe if they go to a park, that kind of thing. So that's been about half our budget, and it's our top priority to go with the schools to say this is how we make Strongsville a very attractive place.
Sure. Well, same question to you. How do you believe the city can attract young families and young professionals?
Well, I think getting the schools in order was certainly part of it. You know, we had a rough patch there where there was a teacher strike, and I was on the school board for a few years before I moved over to city council, so I got experience on both sides of the house. And some of the things that we started to move the district into the right direction were certainly carried on by the people that are on that board today, and they're doing a great job. We're building new buildings, we're rehabilitating other buildings, so that's definitely.
I just want to keep you on track. We're talking about what the city can do.
Sure, absolutely. So, and our role in all of that is that we have a partnership with the schools to facilitate them being able to do all that. You know, we've done things like, they came to us and said, well, so we could do more things to improve what's going on there, can you reduce our fees? So we saved them several $100,000 in permit fees. So there's a lot of that partnership there. There are ways that we get involved, whether it be related to kids' safety, going to school in the morning. On the city side of things, you know, we've certainly got a robust park system. We've got recreation with playgrounds and a very nice rec center that's been there for the families with kids to come and use for many years. We get a lot of compliments on all the different programs we offer through the recreation program. You know, the traditional ones like the t-ball, soccer and those sorts of things, but then all the programs we offer through the rec center. So I think that's coupled with the schools, how the city works to attract young families with kids.
Great. Any response, Mr. Short?
Sure, I just wanted to respond to Mr. Maloney's comments about, again, the taxes and the tax burden. And the other thing is, I think that I failed to mention earlier, is that part of what we need to do too is, as a city, is better collection of taxes. We have a $9 million income tax receivable on our books. And if we're collecting a lot of that, and instead of having these delinquencies, RETA is a collection, it's not a collection agency. RETA assesses the income tax, collects the forms, collects the checks, they'll send you notices, but they don't collect the taxes. I think we as a city need to do a better job of collecting our uncollected tax revenue. That $9 million could go a long way to building roads, building infrastructure, assisting parks, and putting it towards infrastructure that would attract younger families to Cleveland. So again, a lot of the financial and fiscal stuff we can do and be more accountable on can lend to better business, more families, and a better and stronger Strongsville. So I would look at why are we not collecting those income taxes, and council would probably authorize to approve a better collection method to get that money into the city coffers.
Sure. Well, next question. Deer population continues to surge across Cuyahoga County, and many residents are fed up with animals eating their flowers and stomping in their yards. The animals also pose a safety threat to drivers. How can the city work to control the deer population? Mr. Short.
Am I first? Or?
I think.
Are you first or was I first?
I think he went last.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I will really quickly respond to what he said just a moment ago, though. The city does not collect its own income taxes. RETA collects those on our behalf, number one. Number two, our delinquency has gone from 6% 5 years ago down to 2% today. So we've made great progress there, and there are a number of programs that we've implemented to improve in that collection. Relative to deer, our mayor, along with other mayors in the Northeast Ohio area, are working with the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. They have been, for months now, getting together periodically to have meetings to formulate a plan to figure out what we're going to do with the deer. As the mayor said at our council meeting the other night, because a resident was there, and I get calls all the time, as do all of council, people complaining. They eat the plants in my own yard. When I'm driving through my neighborhood, I see them in broad daylight walking around now without really being in fear of anything. So they're definitely a problem. Their population is exploding. But what the mayor communicated is, we can't just arbitrarily by ourselves go and implement a program without trying to coordinate that effort with what's going on around us. So they're working on that. People talk about contraceptives and other things. They've been tried. They don't necessarily get the results people were hoping for. Really, at the end of the day, it seems like culling is the best solution. They do it in the metro parks. They've done it for years. Throughout Strongsville, we have a significant area of metro parks, and they've been able to contain some of the population there. Now we're going to be looking at whether culling becomes potentially a possibility throughout the rest of Strongsville is what I'm hearing.
Any response, Mr. Short?
No, I'll just answer the question when you ask it to me.
Sure. All right. Well, what do you think the city can do to control deer population?
Well, as Mr. Maloney said, I've had the same problem. I mean, deer constantly in my backyard. My holly bushes have been destroyed. They're also a nuisance on the roads. I mean, a lot more neighbors and residents getting, deer running into their car, causing accidents. But, as Mr. Maloney says, and this is probably one thing we agree on, you just can't formulate your own plan. You just can't have, a lot of people say, well, you just can't corral or just, hunt them down, trap them, or even shoot them. I mean, you can't do that in a residential neighborhood. It has to be, I know there are certain rules with the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. So, the city is doing what it can. It's a nuisance all across Northeast Ohio. So really, it's something that, as Mr. Maloney said, and I think we agree on, is that you have to follow certain rules, procedures, regulations, and there's just not a lot that Strongsville as a whole can do on its own. But it's something that the city is working on, continue to work on. Again, we can be proactive of this, and again, try to get ahead of it. That's the best for the residents. But it is very much a nuisance across Northeast Ohio and Strongsville.
Any response, Mr. Maloney?
No, I think we've both very well stated what the opportunity is, and I think we're in agreement on this one.
All right. Well, Mr. Short, what recreational amenities, if any, do you want to see added to the city?
That's a great question. And I have to tell you, when I bought my house in Ward 4 10 years ago, it was right next to the rec center that was on Fultz and Prospect that had an outdoor pool, and that closed shortly thereafter for budgetary reasons. I understand why the administration at that time did that. So I think as we look at what amenities can we provide to families, again, to attract families, everybody would love an outdoor pool. Again, how do we pay for that? How do we find the resources for that? I think that'd probably be at the top of the list for most families, especially in a development like mine that has no pool. But it has to be responsible. And again, I'd first look at if we did a review and we found savings, first to fix the infrastructure, then look at reducing the tax burden to our citizens, and then look at a longer-term plan maybe for an outdoor pool. There's been talk right now currently of a splash pad. There's a petition going around, I'm sure Mr. Maloney is aware of, for a splash pad in Strongsville that I believe, and I don't want to speak, I'm not on council, but it sounds like it's being considered maybe by the administration. I could be wrong. I think those types of amenities are good. Also get more green space and responsible. Jimmy Carbone in Ward 3 has a plan for green space and parks and improving some of the green space in Strongsville. So I think that those are all good ideas because, again, while we continue to foster development, it's got to be responsible, it has to be thoughtful, but we need areas where our children, our families can play and relax. So I think looking at those types of amenities would be good for the city.
Great. Any response, Mr. Maloney?
Sure. When you talk about green space and you talk about our different parks we have throughout the community, when you look at that on a percentage basis per resident that lives in the community, we have the highest percentage of any community in any suburb in Cuyahoga County, because the Metro Parks is a gem we've got coming right down through the middle of the community with all kinds of walking trails and miles of green space, let alone acres. So we certainly don't have a need there. There has been talk about people wanting to ideally get to where we could have an outdoor pool. That's a multi-million-dollar investment, and frankly, the city's been reticent, whether it's with the mayor and his team or with city council, to go and aggressively pursue something like that because we do want to be responsible with how tax dollars are spent. We don't want to be coming out asking for increases all the time, which would potentially be required for something like that, and we still have to deal with flooding in streets, which we feel are more of a concern right now than adding a pool.
So same question, what recreational facilities, if any, would you like to see in the city?
The splash pad idea does sound like a good compromise, where an investment for one that's of a similar size, Broadview Heights is the one that's been used for comparison, would be around $400,000 to $500,000, which is a far cry from a full-blown pool. So I do know that Brian Bogra, who is our Director of Recreation, is taking a serious look at that along with the mayor and starting to explore, as a resident came up for public comment the other evening and said, hey, there's a lot of grant money out there. Some of the other communities that have done that have done a great private-public partnership and with grant money and been able to bring the city's cost down to a small percentage of that. So that would be an opportunity. I know that in a couple of our parks, when you look at the equipment that the residents have available to use, it is starting to age. And so for me, I think ideally we'd find a way to find funding to go in and replace some of those systems with newer systems that are also ADA compliant. That's one area where we are lacking. You know, when you, and the comment was again made the other night at a council meeting that when you look at all the different parks we have, there is not one that's necessarily handicap accessible. So that's something I think might be a neat improvement in the future as well.
Any response, Mr. Short?
No, I just would say, just to be clear, I mean, I'm not advocating for a pool at this point in time. I do think part of our long-term plan, if we formulate a 5-year plan for the growth and expansion of Strongsville and how we can allocate, again, savings and tax dollars would be part of that. But, you know, I think the splash pad is a good compromise. And again, we put in great ball fields with help from the state, from State Senator Tom Patton. So maybe there are outreaches we can do to our state representative, our state senator, to see where we maybe can find money for a pool or a splash pad in the future. But you know, we do have a top-notch recreation facility in the Ernfeld Center, which is, I think, one of the tops in Cuyahoga County. Residents from all over even tell me that, hey, this is a great facility you have here in Strongsville. So again, just to build an improvement that I think is a great thing for the city and can attract more families to Strongsville.
Sure. Councilman Maloney, what city-provided service do you think needs the most improvement, and how would you get that done?
I guess, again, it comes back to roads, and I guess I'll just stick with roads and sewers, but I think roads are probably at the top of the list. I think we're making progress in winning the battle on the sewer side of the equation, as evidenced by, over time, seeing how many fewer homes have had an issue than they did back when I started on council. With the roads, however, you know, it's just frustrating to me as I drive around my ward or anywhere in the community that I'm still encountering more streets that have got potholes and patches on top of patches. And I'd like nothing more than to have the funding to be able to go in and get those torn out and completely replaced because they're overdue. So I know we're working hard all the time to secure funding, you know, whether it be at the county, the state, or the federal level, and we've been successful in that. I mean, overall, if you look at the grant money we brought in, which again helps to keep taxes down, it's in excess of $80 million over the last decade, and we continue to have a track record of being able to find those funds, a lot of which have been used for roads. So I think we'll continue to look under every rock and to apply for every opportunity we can to get funding at those levels to come in and defray the cost. Next year, for example, Pearl Road heading north from Royalton, we're on the verge of getting the ink dried on a deal to bring in more funding from outside to where our cost to be a fraction of what it would have been if we would have done all that ourselves. So I've gotten 20% of them done in my first term, and I'm going to be pushing to do another 20% of the roads that need attention in Ward 4 in my next term.
Sure. Any response, Mr. Short?
I would say that I agree that flooding is still a key, and while the sewer department itself, I don't think is the problem. We have great people that work there that do a phenomenal job, but they can't control, they weren't part of the infrastructure that's in place now that needs to be improved. So I think that one of the things the city would need to do, again, looking at a longer term plan, is how can we again improve our infrastructure, bigger detention bases, bigger retention basins. As we improve roads, how do we ensure that the sewer and the sanitary systems are larger and wider to accommodate more and more water? This will be flowing because there's less and less green space as we continue to build and expand. So I would say that I wouldn't necessarily the sewer department needs improving. It's the tools and the equipment and the infrastructure we're putting around those people to work with needs to be improved.
So same question to you. What city-provided service do you think needs the most improvement, and how would you get that done?
Well, after talking about, you know, working on flooding and the infrastructure, one thing I'd like to see the city do in terms of a service is put our checkbook online. The Treasurer's Office has put the Ohio checkbook online so that citizens of Ohio can see how the state is spending their tax dollars and how every line item of the budget is spent. Cities can do that. Strongsville, to this point, has not done that. And in transparency, I don't see why we shouldn't be able to put our checkbook online to give residents the ability to see how our services and how their money is being spent in the city of Strongsville. So it would be a new department or a new service the IT department could provide, but I would like to see the city be more transparent and put its checkbook online.
Sure. Any response?
Yeah, I don't think that's necessary. I think, frankly, it was a political ploy by our Ohio Treasurer to suggest that something like that should be put in place. We have checks and balances. We get regularly audited by the state of Ohio, and we've had stellar audits the last few years to the point where we won an award for our books. We also, if anybody ever wants to come in and take a look at what we've written checks for, it's all public record, and they can come in and do that, and there's nothing to hide. And to me, it's an inefficient use of city personnel and resources when we're talking about having tight budgets and trying to find money to do things like roads and sewers and whatever else and figure out how to be more efficient. to have people spending time putting information out on a website where, frankly, I think hardly anybody's ever going to go and look at it.
Sure. All right, well, next question. Mr. Short, what are you most proud of about Strongsville?
It is just a phenomenal place to live. Everything from, well, we just had our home days, and the way the community comes together, the chamber, the Rotary, the Kiwanis, I mean, really, there's so many great things about Strongsville. Really, it's just the people. Our commons area and what the city has done and the mayor has done to build up home days with the fireworks, in the fall with the Christmas tree lighting. I mean, those are small town values and small town feels in a very large city, over 50,000 residents. And so, for me, I'm proud to call Strongsville home. My kids, again, you can feel safe to walk at night. We have great police, we have great fire. You can feel safe to walk at night. We have a great school system. I have no problem with my children running around outside playing. I think it's just the people, the quality of services the city provides, and really just the activities that are there. Again, from our rec center to the home days, the tree lighting. Plus, the great thing is I can go 2 miles from my home. I can be at a major mall. I can go 1 mile the other way and be in the metro parks and have peace and quiet. I mean, it's really a unique city in that we have so many gems in the different areas of our city, which is why we decided to stay there. So I think the best part of Strongsville are the people.
Any response?
No, I think Mr. Short did a very good job of summarizing all the things that make Strongsville great. There are a lot of the reasons that my wife and I chose to locate there ourselves. I guess what I would say is that I think there's a cautionary tale to be told here when you look at what my challenger's agenda is, and that is he keeps talking about reducing tax burden. When he was on the staff with Josh Mandel down in the Ohio Treasurer's office, they made budget decisions that cost Strongsville almost $3 million a year that we've had to make up. Then he came out with his campaign platform and said, well, we need to roll back the tax credit, which would cost Strongsville another $4 million a year. And he says, well, there's opportunities to improve efficiency and cut costs all throughout the operation. And at the same time, we're going to be able to go and do roads and resolve flooding. And I just think it's a lot of smoke and mirrors, and there'd be some issues that the community would be dealing with if he were to get on there and be pushing for those kinds of tax reductions.
All right, well, same question to you. What are you most proud of in Strongsville?
The sense of community that is there with a core group of people that for years, multiple generations, have been involved with a lot of different civic activities. And again, in our case, we're involved with a lot of them. So whether it be the City Club or the Rotary or the Chamber, and you look at the thousands of hours of time and energy that all those people put into bringing different activities to the community, doing things like building a food bank when it lost its home because of the new middle school that was going to be built, and knowing that we need to take care of our own and make sure that all aspects of the community can feel safe and comfortable when they're living there. Those are the things that we get excited about, being involved with all those people. And it's the same core group of people that you run into over and over again that are always giving of their time and talent. I know one of the questions that I get asked when I talk about being challenged for this seat, he's lived in the community 14 years, and the first question is, well, who is this person? I've never heard of him. Where's he been? So for me, you have to get involved, and that's what makes it a community, and we're not seeing that with my challenger.
Any response, Mr. Short?
Yeah, well, a couple of points. One is that it's just simply untrue, Ms. Maloney, that the Treasurer's Office has anything to do with the budget and the cuts to the state to Strongsville from the state. That was the governor's decision in his 2011 budget, which was approved by the legislature. So the Treasurer's Office has nothing to do with appropriating funds to any city entity. We just carry out what the legislature and the governor has approved. Secondly, I didn't want to bring it up, but you brought up rolling back the RETA tax, that the income tax reduction was temporary, then made permanent by council. And while it generates $4 million, again, if we look at our savings and our spending, and again, income tax collections continue to rise, we continue to bring in more jobs to Strongsville, why not eventually phase that out in a responsible and reasonable way? And if we can't do it, I wouldn't do it. But again, why not look at that? We never talk about cutting taxes. We're always talking about just spending more and more and more, which I don't think benefits the residents of the city of Strongsville. So to that effect, but I've been involved, Strongsville Education Foundation, in the community. It's a great place. The people make it great. And I think it'll continue to be great long after Scott and I are long gone.
Sure. All right. Well, Mr. Short, I believe. Oh, Mr. Maloney, I apologize.
That's all right.
Back
It's hard to
and
keep track of, put the back and forth there.
That's all right.
The state has cut local government funds in half over recent years. How has Strongsville coped? And what other ideas do you have to kind of make up that difference?
Well, we've been very fortunate that we've effectively made up that difference through our economic development. Those economic development activities have absolutely saved us from devastation from a financial standpoint, bringing in new businesses. A lot of other businesses are expanding and adding significant additions onto their buildings, bringing in new jobs. And it's not the retail jobs, it's the high-paying jobs that are in our commercial and industrial parks to where we have less than 2% vacancy right now in those buildings. And we've got other companies saying, well, now we got to come in to your vacant land and build new facilities. So that's how we've coped. Unfortunately, a lot of the other communities that suffered from those decisions to reduce those intergovernmental funds are bordering on insolvency, and they're coming out with all these ballot issues now trying to make that money up, or they're cutting services all over the place. So we've been very fortunate we haven't had to do that. I think the residents are very appreciative of that. And when I go around and I ask, well, if there was talk about should we reduce our tax burden by making cuts, you know, what services would you want reduced? Well, I don't want any services reduced, and I don't have a problem with what I'm paying, so leave well enough alone. So that's my perspective on how we dealt with those cuts, and we're still in good shape.
Any response, Mr. Short?
Again, the city administration, again, Mayor Persiak, starting even before the recession of '08, looked at ways to improve Strongsville finances. He did get us a AAA bond rating, which helps us our borrowing costs, which has helped fund a lot of projects in the city. You know, the state, the other side of the coin is, yes, the state has cut funding to the cities, local government funds. They've also put in place a lot of incentives that keep and help attract businesses to Ohio. So like a Vitamix to expand into Strongsville, bringing in companies from out of state to Strongsville. So to make Ohio a more competitive tax state nationally, which helps us at Strongsville. So it cuts both ways. And so I think the administration has done a good job. Again, we can look at how we can continue with our economic development team, which is, again, phenomenal, to continue to attract those high-paying jobs to Strongsville to make up that. And again, the city has survived that, and I think we'll continue to do so.
Sure. All right, well, same question to you. The state has cut local governments in half over recent years. How do you think Strongsville has coped, and what other ideas do you have?
Yeah, again, we've coped well, and again, I hate to keep harping on the same thing, but again, we need to look at, if we were able to do that with the state budget cuts, where else can we trim our spending? Where else can we look at inefficiencies in our government that we can pass those savings along to the residents? So again, we need to look at a performance audit by the state auditor would be, I think, a very useful tool that's no cost to the city if they don't find any savings. If they find savings, it's still a minimal cost to that city to have a performance audit done. To work with our own internal staff to find out where can we be more efficient on that side. So Strongsville has coped, and again, we do have a surplus, we do have money set aside to keep that AAA rating, but we also have a surplus above that. Let's look, again, we should have a rainy day fund. The state does, you know, in 2011, the state rainy day fund was 79 cents. It's now a couple $2 billion. We do need to put money aside, but we also should be able to use some of that surplus to help our residents now, not just kick the can into the future, not just raise taxes on them now. We need to ensure that we are spending properly and reinvesting those savings back into our community. So I think we should continue to project ahead too that all the state funding may not be what it once was, and we need to be prepared for that. So, but again, I think it's also helped attract higher paying jobs and better businesses to Strongsville and Ohio as a whole.
Any response?
Yeah, to tap into that reserve fund would be irresponsible. That reserve fund at around $9 million is a fraction of what a lot of other communities have had to do in order to get that AAA bond rating. And part of why we got that AAA bond rating is because of our mayor's banking background, my banking background as well, being on the finance committee, and we have extensive experience that they recognize, knowing that we very effectively manage our finances. This comment about we're not talking to our employees to find opportunities to save is ludicrous. We talk to our employees throughout the city all the time looking for opportunities to save, and ideas come forward routinely to save or to pursue grant money. You know, we've done a lot of things. TIF districts have been set up, which bring in revenue that we didn't used to get, and very few communities understand the complexities of how those work and know how to use those. Things like we put in new lighting throughout the rec facility, which cut our electricity costs tremendously. I could go on and on with many examples.
Sure. All right. Well, Mr. Short, to what extent should Strongsville be involved in regionalism to improve or reduce the cost of public services?
Great question. And I think as state funding gets reduced, as technology improves, and as we continue to move to the 21st century, regionalism, I think, is a natural transition. And I think Strongsville will be very much involved in it. It is currently with our dispatch center that has been set up now for, I believe it's North Royalton, Berea, and Olmsted Falls.
Mm-hmm.
And that has been a great win for Strongsville as well. So, I mean, regionalism is going to continue to adopt. Strongsville, being the great city that it is with the infrastructure that we do have in terms of communications and technology and the size, we can absorb that. And I think for Strongsville, it's a win-win for us to champion regionalism because we can bring those jobs to the city, those services to the city. And I know there's grants, and while there may be a little bit of a burden, I think Strongsville can absorb that and turn it into a very positive for the county and that southwest side of Cuyahoga County, because we can be the epicenter of regionalism and be the hub city, I think. And as cities struggle, as other cities looking to save money and they don't want to cut services to their residents, but they have to still provide them at a lower cost, we can be that city to do that. And I would be, if elected to the council, I would continue to support regionalism that made sense for Strongsville with the proper funding, with the proper grant money, because Strongsville can be the hub to do that.
Councilman Maloney, any response?
Yeah, we already have many examples of being the hub of regionalism. That regional dispatch center, we now have the largest volume of calls outside of the county's system, and in fact, the county is now coming to talk to us about potentially expanding even beyond what we were originally planning to do because they're struggling with trying to get their own regional center constructed. We have a leadership position with the regional SWAT team, and we have the armored vehicle for that that we manage through our facilities, the CERT program, hazmat. We have a command center vehicle that can be driven to other communities if there's a hostage situation or something like that, so that a truck can be pulled up on premises and have people be able to operate right out of there. Diving team, technical rescue team. The list is long, and it helps not only us but all those other communities that we pull together in the spirit of regional cooperation, and it collectively reduces all of our costs.
All right, well, same question to you. To what extent should Strongsville be involved in regionalism to improve or reduce the cost of public services?
I think we do it where it makes sense. I mean, we've had a couple opportunities come before us over the last 4 to 5 years where in some cases it kind of felt like, well, they were trying to force something on us that we looked at and said, well, economically, this is not what would be in our best interest because there'd be more risk that we'd take on or ultimately potentially even take on more cost than we had doing something ourselves. So in cases where we think that would have the potential to happen, we've kind of pushed back and said, we don't think that's a good example of how it can be leveraged. And we've either ultimately figured it out and taken it on, or we've just let it go and left it for another day, but concentrated on other things that made sense in the meantime. One of the areas that we've been in a battle over for some time is with the regional sewer district, and they've tried to impose additional fees on all the communities in the name of regionalism and saying that, well, all those added revenues will be to the benefit of building a bigger system. But the problem is we have no control over that, the money that's collected. So we said, well, hey, shouldn't the communities that each have their own list of challenges, as that additional revenue is collected, why should it just go into the coffers of the regional district to arbitrarily decide where that money will be spent? We should have some control to make sure that those additional tax dollars are going to, not tax dollars, they're fees, we're arguing that they're an unvoted tax, should be available to make sure that they get leveraged and invested into our own infrastructure.
Thank you. Any response, Mr. Short?
No, I think I said all I want to say about regionalism, but thank you.
You're welcome. All right, next question. What would you change about Strongsville?
Well, that's a Good question. I do it again. It's a great place to live, but again, I think it goes back to some of the main themes of my campaign is that we need to do a better job with the infrastructure and being proactive in our city budget and spending. I think we need to be more transparent with putting the checkbook online. Mr. Maloney says it's smoke and mirrors, but there's nothing wrong. Actually, there's no cost to a city. The treasurer's office will put that online, and they pay for it. They're budgeted to pay for it. So I think to let residents see more detail of the spendings. I'm a CPA. I understand financial statements. I can read the CAFR report that the auditor puts together, but the average citizen is not a CPA and understands financial statements. Looking at the checkbook online, everybody can do their own checkbook. I think that'd be a big win for the residents. So I think as we continue to grow, we need to be responsible in our growth. Again, looking at talking with residents, the neighborhoods. Industrial park growth is fine. Those areas, there's not a problem. When we're developing next to neighborhoods, we're putting in businesses or new businesses or redeveloping those areas, or taking out green space, we need to work with our residents. We need to listen. We're going to have to compromise. It's not going to be the residents are always right and the developers are always right. No, we have to meet halfway to address their concerns and just be a more responsive, a more empathetic representative to the people. Again, I pledge I'll return their phone call within 24 hours. On my literature is my cell phone number. They can call me anytime. I'll get back within 24 hours, if not sooner. As a CPA, I return my client phone calls in 24 hours. I look at the residents of the ward as all of them being my clients. So I think that's where we can improve a bit in Strongsville.
Any response?
Sure. Quickly to react to the, I'll be more responsive and I'm absolutely responsive. I've had hundreds of residents come to me over the last 4 years with a whole range of issues. They do get phone calls returned or emails, or I'll go out to visit with them in person. Absolutely listen to what they have to say and do everything I can to help them resolve an issue. So for the implication to be there that I don't, I think is wrong. In terms of things that we can do to improve Strongsville, and speaking of the retail and the hodgepodge, we have done something about that. We, with the Planning, Zoning, and Engineering Committee, we put together an architectural guideline document that is now handed out to every developer that wants to come in and build something new along the Pearl Road corridor. So for years we had a patchwork quilt of all different architectural look and feel and all different kinds of buildings, and that's one example, but I'll get more into that when I answer the question.
Sure, so same question to you. What would you change about Strongsville?
So to continue with what I was saying, that has been feedback we received from residents that in particular, we have these strip plazas that have been cropping up for years, along Pearl in particular, and people have said, when is enough enough? Aren't there other things we can build on what little remaining vacant land we have, in particular along Pearl Road all the way down to Boston? And I absolutely agree, and it was one of the things that I wanted to tackle when I got on council. So that's where we did the work to get that guidelines document put into place, which is now given to developers. It's not so easy to say, well, we'll go and talk to residents and we'll come up with a compromise. All the land is zoned. It's all zoned for a particular use, and it's all tied to the city's comprehensive plan. And you can't go and arbitrarily change zoning of land because you go and have a community meeting with residents who say, well, I don't want that built there. It's not that easy. And that's what leads to litigation, and that's where cities ultimately get sued. And again, back to the property owner's rights, they will more often than not prevail. So we have to work with what we have. To the extent we can, we do talk about potential rezoning, and we meet with the property owners and we work through that and say, well, we do think it would be a win-win that if we change this to a different use, you'd still get the benefits you wanted out of that land while doing something that's more beneficial to the community. And sometimes we're successful, but it's a little harder than it sounds on the surface.
Any response?
No, just to say again, going back to the point of responsible development, especially in Ward 4, at the southern end there, we're starting to see with the widening of Pearl Road up the hill to Boston, with the development of more homes back there, we need to make sure we have like family-oriented, family-responsible types of businesses there. There have been some that have put in that I won't name, but a lot of people have complained about because they're not very family-oriented. So I think we need to ensure that, again, to keep that family atmosphere, to keep Strongsville a strong community that will attract families, that we're attracting the right type of businesses, and we're zoning those properly to attract the right type of retail to Strongsville. So I think, though, overall, those types of businesses will continue. If we do it right and we zone it properly and we get the right types of business in there, it'll continue to attract families, especially into our ward, that southern part of the ward.
All right. Well, we've come to the portion of our program where the candidates can ask each other questions. Both candidates have 60 seconds to respond. We'll start with Mr. Maloney.
I guess, Gordon, the first question I would have is that you've talked repeatedly about how we have to reduce our expenses or reduce our level of tax burden for the community. No specifics. So I guess what I'd ask is, what is it that you would do within the city in terms of the services we offer and where our costs are incurred that would save money?
Well, thank you for that, Scott. And again, one of the things, I don't have all the information you're privy to, being on obviously Finance Committee, and without having the transparency of the checkbook online, I can't see the nitty-gritty detail of how the city is spending their money. So just, again, building on my CPA and accounting background, I look at one, again, in this top to bottom review, I would look at, again, every city, and I know you said you've talked to employees, but in the treasurer's office, what we did is we put together a plan of looking at, and each director was charged with where can they find savings. And that doesn't necessarily mean eliminating personnel, because people are key. People, I think, are the greatest asset to a city and to the city government. So, but what they can provide and giving them a context and an audit plan of where they could look at to save spending, or their ideas can be, even if it's done anonymously, because I know there's some I've talked to, they're afraid to bring up savings because they're afraid that their director may be mad at them. It might not be a city thing, but they're afraid of their boss. We have to foster an open communication with those employees. So, yes, I don't have specifics, but we can put an audit plan in place that would get that done. Or if not, again, address a performance audit with the state auditor.
Thank you. Mr. Short.
I guess, Mr. Maloney, I would say as you look over your last 4 years, what do you see for Strongsville going forward? Where would you look to, again, you talk about you want to continue to fix roads, and what would you be doing more to fix the flooding and the infrastructure on a more proactive basis as opposed to reactive? It wasn't, the flood in 14 was huge because of the rains, and that's when a lot of this got going. So what are you going to continue to do to help the residents of Ward 4?
Well, on the topic of flooding, I think to some extent it has been reactive in certain isolated areas when we've had a big storm and then people have had flooding and we've gone in right to that particular area. But in other cases, I think it has been proactive. A good example would be the Stillbrook neighborhood, which, and unfortunately there were decisions made from an engineering perspective years ago that none of us can control today other than to figure out how to make it better. We had a lot of neighborhoods that were built without basins. So there's just not the capacity to handle heavy rain. Now we're looking at whether it's Stillbrook or a couple other neighborhoods, the city is going to be looking to acquire land and add more basins to the infrastructure, which will slow down the flow of water, which is what they're designed to do so that they don't overwhelm those systems and flood some of the homes that have been plagued with the repeat flooding for many years.
All right, Mr. Maloney. Any questions?
We just kind of keep bouncing back and forth. Let's see, what would be another one? You've made some comments to the effect that you'd be a more empathetic and responsive councilman, and I guess I would be curious to understand what would that translate into. I mean, yes, it's one thing to be able to react and listen and take that information, so how would you use that information to make a difference for residents throughout the ward?
And again, one thing for me was, again, just like I treat my clients, I look at all the residents of my ward as my clients. So it's, again, calling them back right away with a phone call, hearing them, listening to their issue. If I have, obviously going to visit them if there's a flood, if there's something that you need to see, being on top of it right away. And just really being, again, I think people want to just be heard. Whether they're, you may think they're completely wrong, but you have to listen, you have to understand, and you have to try to work with them to figure out what the issue is, what the problem is, and can the city solve that problem. And it's just being, I think, that conduit that they feel comfortable calling you up and discussing with you. Not saying that you're not, but I think one of the things I've heard out there, just quite frankly, is that they want somebody to be a little more responsive. And so that's why I've said that. So,
Mr. Short, any questions?
The only other thing is that I think, this goes without saying with asking this, because I think we get the feel that, and Scott and I have known each other for a long time. Strongsville is a big town, but it's also a small town. But that I would just ask that as we get into the fall and this, obviously, campaign picks up, that we keep this on a political level, nothing personal. This race is not a personal thing against you. I've known you for a while, and it's not a personal thing, and I just like to hopefully we can keep it I guess, political and not get to a personal level, because at the end of the day, we're still going to both live in Strongsville, so I just ask that we keep it respectable.
Mr. Short, I appreciate your comments, but you didn't ask a question. Do you want to ask a question?
Will you keep it respectable?
Well, I guess my way to react to that is I mean, you use the word political, and frankly, I think that's problematic, because that kind of is in keeping with, you know, what I believe your agenda will ultimately be as we approach Election Day. And, you know, if you were to be elected into that seat, we've had evidence that you're going to be looking for higher office. You ran unsuccessfully for state representative. You tried to get appointed to city council vacancies at least twice that I know of. And you were president of the Republican Club on and off for 10 years. You've actively gone around to Republican candidate campaign events. And so I think there's some concern, and I guess I'd ask, how would you react to that, where people are thinking that this guy's not in it for the long haul, he's going to get elected, and within a short period he's going to be looking to move into something else?
I'm sorry. Mr. Maloney, do you have any questions for Mr. Short?
That was my question.
Can I take this as a question?
Okay.
So, well, one, I would say, what evidence do you have that I would go for a higher office? I mean, yes, I did run for state rep unsuccessfully in 2002. I didn't run for another office since then. You went for city council appointments as well. But I have no desire. I tried the Columbus thing. I worked for Treasurer Mandel. I didn't move out of Strongsville. I commuted. That gave me a taste enough. I have no desire to run for a higher office at this point in my life, nor for a long time. I have 2 young children. I want to stay in Strongsville. I want to make Strongsville a better place for my kids to live and to raise my children and to live there. So I have no further ambition. This is like, I'm going to run for city council, then, I'm going to jump into state rep, or I'm going to jump to state senate or something like that. No. But I'm just curious to see what evidence you think that there is out there that I'd be running for this just as a stepping stone for another office.
It's just the history. The history is the indicator.
I wouldn't say that, but okay.
Any other questions?
Mr. Maloney, do you have any future aspirations maybe for an office once, if Mayor Persiak chooses not to run for mayor in 2019?
I do not. I've been asked that question repeatedly, and I've been very candid with people to say, like you, I've got 2 young boys at home, and I value time with family, and we all work hard at that work-life balance. And when you're balancing your day job with all your volunteer activities and then still finding time for family and kids, you know, city council is the peak of whatever I would be interested in doing. So now it'll be on record here, along with anybody else I've talked to, and throughout the community. So no, I love my role on city council, and would love to continue that for the future, many years to come.
Any questions for you?
I don't know how long do we...
We have 10 minutes. We've probably gone through, we have 3 more minutes left.
3 more minutes?
Yeah.
I don't think there's another one that comes to mind.
Mr. Short?
I have no further questions.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us. Please check out the debate of the Strongsville School Board as well. Also, please check back to cleveland.com to read stories about debates, issues, and candidates for the upcoming election.